to do vibrato without a shoulder rest, because, okay, to be honest, it really wasn't my intention to be the anti-shoulder rest guy. Hello everybody, I am Tobiah Murphy from Murphy Music Academy, and today we have our very first request video. This is from JL David, who wanted to know how to do vibrato. He's looking for videos on how to do vibrato without a shoulder rest. Now, this is of course the perfect time to tell all of you, if you have any requests of me, if there's any topic you'd like me to make a video on, then please put that in the comments below. Also, some other wise words from Mr. David. This channel needs more views, and I could not agree more. It also could use some more subscribers. We're at 40 right now, so please, 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 this is the perfect time for you to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button, so you always know when I post a new video, and share the video around. Share it with your friends, anybody that, you know, needs help with stuff. All right, now onto the meat of the video. So the question was how to do vibrato without a shoulder rest. Now, to be honest, the answer to that question really is kind of the exact same way you do it with a shoulder rest. I may have been playing without a shoulder rest for close to 14 years now, but I wasn't always an advocate for playing without one, and to be honest, I started playing, like most of us do, using a shoulder rest. I played with a shoulder rest for about 9 years before my teacher at the time, when I was in the middle of high school, convinced me, that's a nice way of saying this is what you're going to do from now on, to play without one. Now, when I started playing without a shoulder rest, I didn't really notice any issues with vibrato. I mean, I only really had one vibrato at the time. I only did some arm vibrato. It was kind of thin and narrow, but it worked for me, and, you know, that wasn't really one of the things I thought about. Shifting, definitely. Shifting was something that I had to get used to, but vibrato really wasn't much of an issue. So, when it comes to teaching vibrato in this video, and I am going to go over both types of vibrato, arm vibrato and wrist vibrato, or hand vibrato, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to teach it the exact same way I would teach if you had a shoulder rest or if you didn't have one. So, for example, I have a student who's near the end of book 4. She plays with a shoulder rest because she did not start with me. And I don't force my students who are already playing with shoulder rests to not play with them. Anyway, she is just learned how to do vibrato properly. It took several months, and I have to say that is way too late to start doing vibrato. And I don't mean too late in terms of you can't learn it. I mean that a responsible teacher should have taught that several years earlier, but her previous teacher didn't, so now she's learned it, she's caught up, it's fine. But this is just one quick warning I want to give to everyone that is starting out learning vibrato. You have to be patient. It takes a long time to learn to do it properly, and I emphasize properly, because there's a lot of people who think they can do vibrato, who think that they are doing something, you know, that makes the note shake a little bit, and it's not good. It's not good. To really learn how, so you have to have a discerning ear, you have to pay very close attention to the steps I'm going to give you, and you need to be patient. It's at least going to take you half a year. When I learned how to do wrist vibrato, so I started out doing, you know, arm vibrato only, and then actually it wasn't even until I was, you know, halfway through my master's degree that my teacher was like, you need to learn how to do wrist vibrato. He gave me exactly one lesson on it, and I then proceeded to practice that one lesson for an entire year before I had any control over it. And in the middle of that year, when I was, you know, learning how to do it properly, there was a period of time where I felt like I couldn't do any vibrato properly at all. My entire hand felt completely screwed up. That is completely normal. If you push through it, you will learn it, but you have to be patient. Another example, just in case you think, you know, I'm just slow, Daniel Heifetz, who was a concert violinist. He runs now a pretty important summer music institute that I actually went to as a teenager, and also my first year of college, and I also worked there for 2 years. So I have a lot of experience with the Heifetz International Music Institute. It's a really awesome place. If you ever get a chance to go. But Danny Heifetz, he probably wouldn't like me to call him Danny, but Daniel Heifetz went to Curtis and he told me a story about learning to, you know, improve his vibrato. And this is at Curtis, you know, the highest level music school probably in the world. He got in when he was 16 years old, and his teacher had him start reworking his vibrato, and it took him 8 months. So if I'm 4 months slower than, you know, a Curtis student at learning, who is, you know, several years younger than me, and at the time he's starting to redo everything to learn vibrato, then I'd say that's pretty good. So if you learn to do this in 6 months to a year, you're doing great. You're doing great. Do not think that you are being slow. Just push through. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Now, before we get started, there are some preliminaries that you need to make sure you have down before you start learning vibrato. First, make sure that you have a good hand form. So that means that your wrist is straight, that you're generally pretty good with your fingers. Your fingers aren't doing any weird squeezing things like this. Your wrist isn't like this or like this. Basically, make sure you have basic violin finger technique, left hand technique in first position, down. Also, make sure that you generally play with your violin up. Obviously, if you don't play with a shoulder rest, then this is something that you're going to be thinking about more, because you have to hold the violin up. All the weight of the violin is here on your arm. So I have to constantly tell my younger students, well, some of them do this pretty well, but a lot of students, when they start out with me, because they're not holding the violin like this, end up sinking their elbow down to here, and I have to tell them, you know, it takes a little while for them to get used to holding the violin up in their hand. And to be honest, I know we've all seen a lot of kids who do play with shoulder rest that still do this. So if you are supporting your violin on your arm and then supporting your arm on your side, then you need to master holding the violin up, having a little space in here before you start learning how to vibrate. And last but certainly not least, can you play generally in tune? Now, if you have a teacher, hopefully they will be the ones who can tell you whether or not you are playing in tune. If you aren't sure, then get out a tuner. So on my phone, I have an app called Clear Tune. It's a fantastic app. It's not free, but it's like $3 or $4, and it's completely worth it. So you can go here to Clear Tune. I have it set to, well, right now it automatically is set to sort of pitches, so it's just picking up whatever my voice is doing, a bunch of different notes here. But you can also set it to, you know, drones and things like that, which is, you know, super handy for tuning. And where is the A? Why does the A not on A? There we go. There's an A. Okay. Anyway, so set this up. There we go. Set this up on your music stand and play an A major scale in first position. And if the dial is generally between the 10 and the 10, generally, then you can start vibrato. If it is waving all over the place, and you should try to get it between 5 and 5 or pretty much on the dot. But if it's just consistently just waving all over the place, and you aren't even doing vibrato yet, then you need to master that. You need to get your hand frame, you need to get your intonation into position before you start to learn vibrato. Okay, so now you've got decent hand frame, you've got decent intonation, you've got, you know, decent, your hand's not, you know, your wrist isn't broken or isn't going one way or the other, and your fingers aren't smashed like this. All right, how do we start doing vibrato? Well, the first thing you do is put the violin down. That's right, that's right. We're going to put the violin down because we are going to start with arm vibrato. That's what I want everyone to start learning with. Don't want to start learning wrist vibrato, want to start learning arm vibrato. And the first thing that we're going to do is practice the motion itself. So, why do I think it's so important to start with arm vibrato? Well, the reason for this is because that is what I believe makes the base of what I call motor vibrato. So anyone that's been, you know, teaching violin for any significant period of time, or they've been playing at any kind of high level, they likely went through a phase where their teacher was constantly telling them to make their vibrato more consistent. See, when most students first learn to do vibrato, what they usually end up doing is just vibrating on the longer notes. Only the notes that are maybe, you know, a half note sometimes, or a quarter note deal. Eighth notes, forget it. Anything faster than eighth notes, especially, never going to happen. And what I want people to get used to is just have this constant sort of motor going with their arm vibrato. Now, can you have sort of a motor vibrato going with wrist vibrato? Yes, I believe that is entirely possible. Of course, there are people that do it. I just have found this to be the thing that works best for me. This is the thing that I think works best for people to teach. I think it's important that you know how to do both. And so that's just the way I'm going to teach it. And for an example of what I'd consider to be motor vibrato, I'll just take something like an A major scale. Like I said, you should play at the beginning. And sort of most people would play it, you know, or at least most people just learning vibrato that aren't used to this would just be like... And the idea, if you're going to play it that slow, then you can easily add a few vibrato swings into that. So... I'm barely doing anything here, but my hand is just in this kind of vibrato mode, so it gives a little bit of liveliness to all of the notes. Okay, so I have put my violin and my bow down, and it is time to start with the very first exercise, just to get the movement of the arm moving from the elbow going back and forth. Now, what you want to focus on is throwing your hand back at first, and then you just feel it kind of almost bouncing back. Don't try to control the motion back and forth. It should just feel like this. Keep your wrist a little bit wobbly. That's okay. You don't have to keep this kind of rigid, straight wrist. Just get used to this. Now, to check to make sure that you're having a correct rhythm, an even rhythm of this motion, get something like an egg shaker or even a pill bottle. I have this bottle of melatonin here, and you can just, anything that'll make noise that you can kind of tell the rhythm from going back and forth, and just do a little bit of that every day. Now, once you are comfortable with doing this motion and you feel it's completely loose and it's completely even, and I cannot emphasize even enough, if your vibrato motion is not even, you will not succeed, then you can pick up your violin, and we are going to start being able to practice moving our fingers mostly at this joint. This joint right here. So we are actually not going to, you can keep practicing this movement, but that's not what we're going to start with in the violin. Because ideal is that, again, we're pulling back, and your finger has to be firm enough on the string, but loose enough to where it straightens about to here, not to here, but to here, and then back. That's basically all the vibrato motion is. It's just this nice, even motion back and forth. So, first things first, put your hand up to the violin, up against the body of the violin. For most of you, this will be in about fourth position. I don't care if you don't play in positions yet, but you're just going to want to put your hand up against the violin just so you have somewhere where you can feel it. All right, next thing you want to do is, let's start with your second finger. That's the one that I used in the previous shot. So it's a little bit easy to see here. So I have to kind of change my angle here a little bit. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to hold the violin like normally. Now, obviously, this is not normal. I'm putting my fingers down here, but this is just so you can see it. And you're going to very slowly and very controlled, control is key, pull back from here till the finger reaches about that level. Don't go too far. And then back. This is why we keep the hand up here, so you can kind of have a place to stop yourself. So just get used to doing this very evenly. Now, of course, you will want to practice that motion on every single string, and you also want to keep practicing this motion for a while as well. Now, once you have gotten pretty good at just doing this, of course, I'm doing that a little bit faster, so let me do a little slower. Once you've gotten used to doing this on every finger, then you're going to want to actually add the bow. Now, you want the bow to basically be from this part of the bow up to this part of the bow. Just let the weight of the bow take care of it. Don't try to put any extra pressure. Just a nice, even... You can even hold the bow with just a few fingers like this. So you can focus mostly on what's happening here. You don't want any fluctuations in the sound. So what you're going to do is you're going to do the exact same thing, but now you're going to hear the note wobbling back and forth. So let me find, and go ahead and make sure you find an actual note, not just like a quarter tone or something. So I'm up here. I'm going to actually be in, I think, fourth position. So, okay, so this is an F sharp on the A string in fourth position. This is my second finger. I'm going to put my third and fourth fingers down here, which you should not do, but I'm doing this so you can see. And it's going to look like this. Sounds awful, doesn't it? That's okay. That's what you have to do. Just get it until it becomes very even. Get it to where it just sounds like wah, 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 but the wah is very consistent. And of course, do that on every single finger, and also make sure that you feel like this up against the violin right here is home. You want this to be home and this to pull away from home. So you don't want to feel like you're doing controlling, moving to here, then moving to here, then moving to here. And I will emphasize this multiple times, because if you think too much about back, forth, instead of stretch, back to normal, stretch, back to normal, it will not be even, and you can't control for this. You will be so tight if you try to go back, forth, instead of stretch, slap back to normal, stretch, back to normal. So once you have practiced this sort of bass oscillation movement on every single finger with your bow, now it is time to start practicing speeding it up. So what you want to do is to pull out your metronome. Now, some people do not believe you should use the metronome to practice vibrato, and I completely disagree. The metronome is how I taught myself to do wrist vibrato, and I have a very, very good wrist vibrato. I have complete control over my hand whenever I am doing wrist vibrato. So I highly advocate for the metronome. So what do you want to do? You want to pull out the metronome. I put it at, say, let's say 60 beats per minute, and your oscillations back and forth are going to be eighth notes. Now, 60 beats per minute might be too fast for you. You might need to put it at 50. You might need to put it at 40. You might need to do 60 beats per minute with the oscillations being quarter notes. It does not matter. Whatever you do, find where you can do it evenly and consistently and under complete control, and stick to that tempo. Now, I also highly advocate for mixing it up between duplets and triplets. So sometimes you will try to do 60 beats per minute, duplets, eighth notes going back and forth. So one oscillation on each eighth notes. Then you should also try to do it in triplets. That will bolster your ability to control. If you can do both even triplets and even duplets within the same beats per minute, then you know you have very good control over your arm oscillations. So for example, this is what this would look like. So I'm going to put the metronome here at 60 beats per minute, and I'm going to do it in eighth notes. So it's like this. Okay, simple. Now I'm going to do it in triplets. Okay, that's it. If you can do both of those, then you're golden. Once you are able to do that, then move the metronome up, whatever number you have it on, whatever type of note you're playing it on, then move it up 2 by 2. So we're at 60, and the next thing, after I feel like I've mastered that, then I am going to move it up to 62. And you keep doing this until A, you either run out of time, you get too tired and don't want to keep doing it, or you lose. You get to a tempo where you can't control it anymore. Once you hit there, then stop and start practicing it again the next day. Now, of course, eventually you are going to get to a tempo where doing it straight, strict eighth notes with the metronome, you're going to get to a tempo where it's not going to actually work. You're not going to be able to control it strictly at that tempo, especially if you are doing it, let's say, in triplets. For some of you, that might be, around the 140 range. I just checked with myself. I could do around 150 easily. I didn't actually check much higher than that. But about that point, sometime a little bit before that point, when you start to, get to where the metronome really isn't practical. You're not supposed to actually be thinking, exactly in eighth notes or triplets or whatever while you're vibrating. You're just supposed to have this motion of vibration, and then just, try to make it work for the music you're playing. You should be trying to go for a little bit before you reach maybe somewhere between 130 and 150 beats per minute. You should try to be going for just the best vibrato that you can go for. And this is something you're going to have to try to rely on ear, sort of the aesthetics of the sound, if I could say that phrase. So now step away from the metronome and try to do a obnoxiously wide but very even vibrato just by yourself. So again, I'll do D this time, or G this time. So I'll just go. Now, of course, there is no music unless it's you're doing a joke that would use vibrato like that. But that's a little bit faster than what you'd be doing with a metronome. It had a nice feel to it. It was even. I wasn't changing what I was doing. And again, it's throwing the hand back and almost feel like it's, stretching back and then bouncing back into place. And you want to start out with this wider vibrato so you can hear it better. So just get that nice even wah wah wah. It's also more difficult to control it at a narrow pace. So we're going to start a little bit wider, wah wah wah, and that's just exactly that wah is what you're going for. I want to be able to hear every single oscillation. Now, once you have done that and are pretty good with just that kind of very simple, over wide vibrato, then it is now time to remove your hand from the body of the violin and go ahead and put yourself in third position and be able to feel sort of stretching back and then getting, stretching back and then throwing, having your hand bounce back into this position here without having to feel the violin up here. So now I'm actually going to take the D here. And just practice like that. And again, practice it on every single finger. I'll also make sure that the hand, say, you have your default finger, your default shape to your finger, and then the finger goes back and then comes back to here. Make sure you're never going over where you stop. You're always pulling back and then going, you're pulling backwards and then going up to the starting point. Back, starting point. So after you get a little bit more comfortable just doing this wide oscillating vibrato right back down here with every single finger, make sure you practice every finger, including the fourth finger. Now you're going to try to use your ear to help you speed and the vibrato up and narrow it down. So the reason we're going to use our ears because at this point, the metronome is not helpful. We're going a little bit too fast. We don't want to be married to the metronome on this. Eventually it does come down to, because vibrato is an expressive device, it comes down to being regulated based on what we hear and what we feel. So you're just going to have to listen closely and above all, always make sure that you are loose. And again, that you are following the exact motor pattern here where you pull back a little bit here, the knuckle doesn't collapse, but also that when you come back, it doesn't go over like that. And also make sure, of course, that your arm and wrist stay very straight while you're doing this, but don't be rigid. And that's not right. Don't be rigid with it. And you have to keep basically everything loose, but have the same level of control. So you're going to want to feel like you're throwing your hand back still, and it bounces back into place after sort of being stretched like a rubber band and going back into place. Now, on not using a shoulder rest, even though I believe the technique is exactly the same, I actually did have my student that I recently taught vibrato to, the one that was a little bit late to learning it. I had to practice it without a shoulder rest, even though she plays with one most of the time. This is because there's so much tension in everything that she was doing. She was tensing up here, which was causing a chain reaction to put tension in here, and she was trying to control back and forth instead of throw back, snap back, throw back, snap back. And so I actually had to practice. I wanted her to feel the violin doing this. And by the way, this is okay. If you play without a shoulder rest, some of you are trying to play without shoulder rest, you've been playing with one for a long time, and you're trying to play with one, go watch Nathan Milstein play Paganiniana. Just everything I'd want to be in a violinist is in that video. But his violin, I mean, it's not quite this much, but if you look closely, he is so loose. He lets his violin just move all around. So, have a very light chin here. You can practice the motion, just feeling the violin go back and forth. And just get used to the violin moving back and forth. It's okay, you can do it. Just get used to it. It'll help you keep yourself loose. Now, of course, while you play, you're going to put a little bit more pressure on the chin so the violin doesn't move around that much. But it's still not a bad thing, and you should still allow it to be. You want everything... playing without a shoulder rest is a lot of just letting gravity take care of things, letting things be. So now you've, practiced this for another couple of months or so, and you've mastered, basic vibrato. You've got a very nice, even vibrato stroke on every finger. And remember, a good basic vibrato stroke shouldn't be super noticeable. You should only be doing like some kind of, crazy if the music actually calls for it. So we are just going for the most basic vibrato stroke possible. But you've mastered that, you're doing it pretty well. Now what is the next step? The next step is to be able to turn it into motor vibrato. That is where your hand is just going all the time. Actually, your arm is going all the time. We'll get into hand vibrato a little bit later. I know this is going to be a really long video. Watch in segments. It's going to take you a long time to learn this anyway. So in terms of ratio of how long it will take you to learn this to how long this video is, not actually a long video. So what I've found to be the best way to learn to do motor vibrato, or just have this constant motion going with your vibrato, is to practice using the last oscillation from one finger to throw the next finger down. So first, you just want to start with a scale on the A string, just 4 notes, A, B, C sharp, D, or La, Si, Do, Re for my European and solfege nerd friends out there. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start A, and we're actually going to vibrate A, even though it won't hear anything. And then use the the last oscillation going back this way to throw the first finger down. So, and then B to C, and so forth. Once you get comfortable doing that on all of your fingers, actually you should probably go all the way up to E, just, some people this would be the most comfortable thing to do. Then what you're wanting to do is try to do it all in one bow. So do all 4 or 5 notes in one bow using the vibrato to throw the next finger down. So until you feel you basically have, no difference between putting the finger down and vibrating. Now, of course, I know that putting the finger down and vibrating are 2 separate motions, but the problem is the reason a lot of people have on-off vibrato is because they think in terms of, separating those 2. So put finger down, then vibrate, instead of being able to amalgamate them and have them both happening at the same time. So you keep practicing this and you end up with a beautiful, consistent motor vibrato on, let's say, a 2-octave, A major scale, like. And it's lovely and it's beautiful, and you think, great, okay, now how does this apply to the music you are learning? Again, you don't have to be very advanced to learn vibrato. You just have to have good hand structure and be consistent in at least first position. So let's say you are at the end of Suzuki Book 4 and you are playing the Vivaldi A minor concerto, the 3rd movement. Now, what you'll hear a lot with young students is this. They're only vibrating the long notes. Partially it's because they haven't been taught to do motor vibrato, but also they don't know how to think about vibrating 8th notes, especially not in the context of, there's a difference in doing it in a scale and doing it in the context of a piece. Now, there is actually a very simple solution to this, and that is to either tell yourself or tell your students that when it comes to those 8th notes, to just throw the hand back. That's how they should think. Just throw the hand back a little bit. Because it really takes only a couple of shakes, a couple of oscillations to get that electric liveliness to all of the 8th notes. That's all it takes. And, once you get used to that, you're going to have to bug yourself or bug your students about that for a little bit while. But once you get used to that, you're not going to want to play without it because it just makes everything sound that much better. Now, some of you might be wondering, what about wrist vibrato? I'm almost half an hour into this video, and I haven't really talked about hand or wrist vibrato. And my answer to that is basically all of the steps to learning wrist vibrato are exactly the same as what I told you to do to learn arm vibrato. You start here, you move the finger, the joint of the finger at the exact same, level back where it's flat and not collapsed. You get this under control on every single finger. Once you're comfortable, you move back to here. Basically, every single step, you're just moving from here instead of from here. Now, you'll notice, of course, that the steps to vibrato are not maybe quite as clear-cut as some other things in violin, and that is because vibrato is extraordinarily personal. Think especially, old school violinists, you could sometimes tell exactly who was playing based on the vibrato. Think of, Elman or Chrysler or Oistrakh, or especially somebody like, Heifetz had vibrato that was so distinct that you could tell who it was, mostly based on their vibrato. So your vibrato probably isn't going to be that distinct. Mine is not that distinct. I don't know any real living violinist whose vibrato is that distinct. Maybe Maxim Vengerov, but that might be it. or Hilary Hahn. That might be another one. But it comes down, it's a very personal thing. It's based on what you hear. You kind of have to mess around with it. You have to be very vigilant to make sure that you end up with a good vibrato that you like, that is, and again, this is the most important thing, is under your complete control. Anyway, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. I know it was a long one, but I really felt that vibrato needed this level of detail. Remember, even after you learn vibrato, you can spend decades trying to get it to that platonic ideal that hopefully you have in your head. So if you have any questions, any other techniques, any other thing related to violin at all that you would like me to make a video on, please put it in the comments below. Or you can send me a private message. My contact information will also be in the description below here. And I give Skype lessons if anyone is interested in that. And also remember, there is no pleasure in mediocrity. I'll see you next time.